It does energy management much better than Tesla. And the two places I really see gains right now are in. So before the pandemic, I was a scuba instructor. I was a master diver trainer, and that was a lot of fun. Some of the coins that I'm really interested in right now are Ethereum.
Hey guys, it's Dylan. For context, this was the first time I had the privilege of talking to Alex. That's important because for me, I wanted to get to know him as a person, and because of this, we actually ended up talking for hours only to be cut off by a power outage at my house, hence the abrupt ending. I did my best to edit this down for you guys, but Alex had so many excellent insights and perspectives to share, so it was pretty hard to do. I mean, Alex is a former rocket scientist, so he knows a thing or two about a thing or two. Anyway, please leave a like now before you forget. The timestamps are below for your viewing pleasure. Enjoy the show. Where are you at when it comes to like crypto and all that stuff?
So I was lucky enough. I started crypto maybe 2 months ago. So before the most recent flash crash. So I had everything set up to like buy in at the most recent bottom. So me and a couple of my buddies are researching a lot of tokens and crypto like crazy, and I'm getting up to speed. I agree with you completely. I think, my channel is all about public stocks, right? And the two places I really see gains right now are in private equities. So before they go public, and crypto. It's a real shame because people are like, show me your portfolio. And I'm like, I can't because I don't hold, all my money is in crypto and in private stocks. So it's like, I kind of feel like a hypocrite, but all my ideas, the idea is like ARK really guides my research, both in crypto and what I look for in private equities. So it's like, it sounds like I'm a little bit of a hypocrite, but in reality, that framework really is how I gauge a good investment, so.
Yeah, it's definitely some pros and cons to the YouTube life, but tell me about it. Like, how has it been for you? Like, do you have days where you miss the stability, or was it like you were just all in, this is what you've wanted to do?
This is what I wanted to do. I would say in the beginning. So right when I quit my job like 4 months ago. Yeah. So right when I started, when I went full time, so I had just formally quit my job, my health insurance expired, whatever. And then my view count went down by 80%. It was like the most brutal thing ever. I went from, 80,000, 90,000 views of video down to like literally 5,000. And I could not figure out why. I started looking around other finance channels and I realized it must have been an algorithm change because everyone's traffic is like way down. But man, it was like as soon as I turned the corner and couldn't go back to my stable day job. So I think that was the only time that I really, really missed it, was when I was like, I was already out the door. I took all the risks and then the channel just plummeted. But by now we're like back up and running. I built this whole studio, and now instead of struggling to do one video a week, I'm like easily doing 3 a week. Right. So it's like a big, big difference in the channel. And by now this is all I want to do. I love journalism. I love research. My focus is still on investment research and equities. And so what that means is I get to double dip, right? My research guides my investments and it guides the material for my channel. Can't think of a better use of my time, so.
Tell me about like, what do you like to do outside of research? Like what are your hobbies?
So my interests lately have been changing a lot, mostly due to the pandemic, right? So before the pandemic, I was a scuba instructor. I was a master diver trainer, and that was a lot of fun. Nice. So I kind of gave that up when I moved to Florida, and then the pandemic happened. Now I'm really into just like running the outdoors, spending as little time on the computer as possible, since so much of it is like already spent there. Traveling, beer, breweries, that kind of stuff. I'm a big audiobook guy. Like that's been my big thing lately, especially in the car. I just consume lots and lots of audiobooks. So I'm right there with you, reading, spend way too much time on YouTube, more than I care to admit. Some of the coins that I'm really interested in right now are Ethereum, BNB, Binance Smart Chain and all that. And then Freeway token, which is going to be AUBITS, AUBITS maybe is how it's said. Which is a different type of crypto-based lending platform. Because I think as more people get up to speed on crypto, there's going to be a lot more of these exchanges, online, offline, centralized, maybe decentralized exchanges, if that's going to be a thing, if it's not already a thing, that people will start signing up for. And that will drive up the value of like those base coins, right? The things that they have to convert to first in order to buy whatever other coins they're interested in. So I'm interested in those. And then I'm interested in like tokens and coins that try to gamify crypto. So lottery systems, little kitschy games where you collect NFTs and stuff like that. Because I think when you get crypto tied to an activity like a lotto or a game or whatever, that's when people buy in. They're like, oh, I don't get the crypto side yet, but I understand a lottery. So this is a good place to start, right? Like,
sure.
So those are the two sides of the crypto coin that I'm focused on: exchanges and games.
Dogecoin, where do you stand?
I am not a fan of Dogecoin, not because of Elon or whatever. It's just like it started as a meme coin. It tried to be a meme coin. Like, I don't understand. I think it's cool to just let it be a meme coin. I think that's the value of Dogecoin. That's its place in history. I definitely respect that the devs are capable devs and can do something, but it's like, if they wanted to do something serious, maybe it shouldn't be named Dogecoin, right? Like, so that's my take. I'm sure I'm going to get flack for that on my channel too. So,
do you own mostly Bitcoin and Ethereum, or like do you have like a rough breakdown?
I'm probably like actually 70% in BNB, Binance Smart Chain.
Okay.
I'm about 15% into Matic. The Polygon coin. And then I'm like 5 or 10% into a coin called YOLO Draw, which is trying to be a cryptocurrency lottery. So that's what I was saying before about the games and the like gamification of crypto. I believe strongly that those types of use cases will drive more people in. And this is trying to be the first like lottery game where it's like you try to buy a little bit every round of the lottery, and then a random buyer is selected to win like a bonus payout or whatever is how the coin is structured. So I like that idea. I like that framework. So the name of the token is YOLO Draw, and it's on PancakeSwap.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your life before YouTube?
Sure. So I had a pretty interesting academic career. I actually went to an engineering vocational high school because my district high school back in New Jersey wasn't that good. So I got like a lot of early exposure to engineering. I was a mechanical engineer in high school. I went to a school called Stevens Institute of Technology for my bachelor's and master's. They're in electrical engineering and applied math. And I focused a lot on like applied math and artificial intelligence there. And then I went to MIT, where I became a rocket scientist. So I worked on radars and telescopes for ballistic missiles and rocket applications. So I have 2 unfinished PhDs. They're both like in applied math and AI. So a lot of that overlaps a lot with how Tesla does its like sensing and autonomous navigation. So just like Tesla used optics and radars to guide a car, we used optics and radars for different missile and rocket-based applications, looking up, and watching them come in or what have you, right, for the government. So I spent 8 years at MIT as a rocket scientist, focused on a lot of the academic applied math for that. And then after that, I joined a company called RMG Media, which my friend helped start, and I was the chief data analyst and strategist. So I would use data analytics and tools to tell CEOs of different companies how to grow their businesses online, right? Hey, you need to build this web app for this product. Hey, you should invest in this tech stack because it's the way the world is moving. Hey, you should build this progressive web app instead of building the same thing 4 times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So between all those things, I got a real appreciation for many different advanced technologies. And that is kind of like the background of why I'm a tech guy, why I'm a stock guy, and all that kind of stuff, or at least why I'm a tech guy. Let's start there. It's an academic, AI-driven background.
Do you have any intentions on finishing either of those PhDs?
At this point, no. So I got caught. There are 2 things that happened that made me quit both times. One is the government funding for that area of research is very, very competitive. And I truthfully just couldn't get the funding that I needed. And both departments that I was working through wanted me to change my topic enough that it was going to be different than what I wanted to do. And if you know nothing else about the PhD process, know that it's grueling and long. And if you don't like your topic going in, your chances of finishing it are very, very low. And then the second thing was it became cost prohibitive for me to do myself. Tuition rates are like, if you think inflation is bad, just look at a chart of inflation for tuition rates and textbooks, you're going to cry. And that's exactly what happened to me. By the time I decided to not keep going, my tuition was legitimately like 40% higher than when I started. So there's a big disconnect between the amount of money I thought it would take and the amount of money it would end up taking for me to fund myself. And I was just like, hey man, I'm not doing this. So
yeah, that makes sense. Given your days as a rocket scientist, if you could only have one company exist, SpaceX or Tesla, which would it be and why?
So given my days as a rocket scientist, I think I would actually go with Tesla. So rocketry, I think, is a really interesting opportunity, but I'm not so sure it'll ever be truly profitable. The things that I think make SpaceX profitable are all the things they get to attach to the rockets, right? All of the constellations of satellites, the services they can provide and charge for, and all that. I think by lowering launch costs and all of the great things they're doing, they're accelerating humanity's pace and reach to the stars. And I think all of the things we'll do up there, you can imagine like asteroid mining and all that is super cool. But the SpaceX thing itself, I think, is just a means to some other end. Whereas Tesla, I think, is achieving the actual end, right? That electrification to clean up the world. Like when you buy a Tesla, you're directly contributing to that, right? You're directly taking one gas car and turning it electric. You're taking one man-powered car and making it autonomous eventually, right? So I think the reason I like Tesla more than SpaceX is just because you're a lot closer to contributing directly to the vision when you invest in that company, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I always have the pushback too of, obviously I support what SpaceX is doing, but how many people in the mainstream market are going to want to go to Mars or are going to want to do that type of travel? Like, because we'll get to this eventually, but I even think about robotaxis. When will the mainstream trust riding in a car without a driver? I think it's a big question. And yeah, we might have some work to do for sure. But I have 3 quick questions for you that are basically going to tell us all we need to know about you, Alex. So the first, what is your favorite fast food?
My favorite fast food is Chick-fil-A, and I am unapologetic about that.
My guy, me too. Same. Next one, are you a coffee drinker? And if so, how do you take it?
I'm drinking coffee right now. I actually take it black.
My man, 2 for 2. Third one, iPhone or Android?
I am an Android user.
All right. Well, Alex, thank you for your time. This has been fun. Why Android over iPhone?
There's no reason. I love the iPhones. A lot of my friends are on iPhones. I'm just deep into the Windows ecosystem. I'm deep into the Microsoft ecosystem, the Google ecosystem. And so I've just never, ever stopped using Android. There's nothing wrong with iPhones, just not for me.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
So when you started making YouTube videos, did you do it with the mindset of like, I want to do this full time, or was it kind of a fun side project?
It was actually, believe it or not, neither of those things. I found a real disconnect so my YouTube channel covers ARK Invest, right? And I found there was a real disconnect between what ARK Invest was saying about their own work and what other YouTubers were saying about ARK Invest's work. So that it actually got born out of a need. I wanted to find the YouTuber who was trying to explain ARK Invest. Like, who do I follow to understand what ARK Invest is doing? And it turns out, in my opinion, it was no one. Just like everyone's like, oh, ARK Invest bought this today, and they wouldn't go into the research. So I saw that need, and I believed at the time that I could fill it. So that's actually what drove me to start the channel. And it became a passion and it became a hobby, but really that lack of market fit or market being filled is what drive me to try to fill that void.
Okay, cool. So walk us through your decision to leave your very prestigious career to do YouTube full time. Like, at what point did it become something that could actually become your career? Take us through that.
Yeah. So initially I figured I would just be putting out videos that a couple hundred people watched. Like, I was thinking I would be a very, very, very niche channel, right? Like explaining ARK Invest's research, just trying to hey, here are these really long, technical, math heavy papers. Not that they're boring at all, but maybe they're very hard to digest, right? And I figured there would be a couple hundred people who would want to digest those, but need some help walking through them. And so it'd be a cool hobby, whatever, right? Fast forward, and when I started getting 6-figure views, right, 100,000, my first couple of videos with 100,000 views, I realized that there was a big hunger, like a really big need and a big want for people to really understand the way their lives are changing, right? ARK Invest happens to be a financial firm, but really, I think their research is driven by this desire to expose people to the technologies that are changing the world. And the nice thing about these technologies is if you believe that, you can go and invest your own hard-earned dollars. And when I realized that YouTube was going to categorize me as a finance channel and not a technology channel, that's when I was like, oh, it's possible to make a living off this, right? Enough people have the demand, and YouTube, not to bring money into it, but will reward me enough because I'm talking technically about finance that I could see myself doing this full time. And then I did it alongside my day job for about 5 months. And I was like, hey, I have to quit one of these. And at that point, it was enough of a passion project where I didn't quit YouTube.
Ticker symbol U. Tell us about like the backstory of where the name came from, because I think it's an important topic.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's actually the single most important thing about my channel is the name and the tagline. I'm the channel that invests in the investor, right? Like, I'm not here to pump stocks. I'm certainly not here to pump ARK's funds. At the end of the day, they're just baskets of stocks, right? What I really care about, and what I think the big disconnect is, there's something called the investor behavior gap. And I'm sure you very well know what it is, but basically the average investor grossly underperforms their own investment. Meaning, if I bought Tesla and I did nothing, I would be much better off than if I bought Tesla and tried to trade it and whatever, right? Tesla's actual returns versus my returns holding Tesla, there's a big gap between them. That's the investor gap. And that's due to just like the average investor not having good investing habits, not having strong convictions in the stocks they hold, not understanding the companies behind them and whatever, right? Like that lack of due diligence, for lack of a better word. So I wanted to be a channel that flipped the script and focused on that due diligence, that research, connecting the dots, putting together the story, and bringing that to investors, and then letting them make their own minds up about what stocks those ideas represent, right? 3D printing is going to change the world. Electrification, here's what it means, not just for the environment, but for the way society moves. AI and everything, right? On and on and on. And then whatever you believe about AI, you can go invest in. Whatever you believe about electrification, the blockchain, genomics, whatever. It's like you take that and you run with it. But now you understand a little bit more about these crazy innovations that are driving changes in the market. Or you can take that information, not invest, and be like, hey, this is a cool technology. I didn't even know gene sequencing worked like that, right? And now you're just a little bit more knowledgeable in that space, right?
Tell us about the worst part about being a YouTuber for you.
Yeah, I think there's two. I think the first worst part is obviously, you upload a video and then you're super critical about it, and, it doesn't get the views or the reception you want, or however you manage success or, measure success. That always stinks, right? So tying your value to external validation is hard not to do, right? So as a content creator, you want people to like you and your work and appreciate it. And that's just not in your head, that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is say, hey, at 0 views or whatever, before I launch this video, this is a good piece of content. And even if nobody watches it, I'm proud of the work. And I understand that here, and I'm still having trouble understanding that here, right? So that's one. And then the other thing is, because the schedule is so fluid and, everyone works from home, certainly including YouTubers, it's hard for me to turn that off. So I'm always thinking about the next video. I'm always thinking about the news. I'm always trying to get the latest updates on what's going on. And achieving that work-life balance has been tricky for me because I tend to just be a workaholic. I love the research. I love the production. I love the commentary. And separating my YouTube personality from my normal day-to-day has been a tricky challenge that I'm still navigating,
Mm-hmm. Speaking of schedule, why don't you walk us through like a typical day in the life of Alex?
Sure. Yeah. So my typical day, which includes weekends, I wake up, the first thing I do is I download ARK Invest's latest data. So they publish their data nightly. So I pick it up in the morning. I update my dashboards that you see all over my channel. I push them out to, I make those in a program called Tableau. We can speak about the dashboard specifically whenever. But I push the updates out to the dashboards with the latest data every day. And then I just spend a few minutes just looking through it manually. It's a very manual process for me on purpose. I chose not to automate that so that I can really look through the data as I update it. I do that every day because that's my connection to the market through ARK Invest. And I look for insights in the data. And if I don't find any, I will start reading the news. I have a list of sources that I go to that I find are very trustworthy, up to date on technology, up to date on the markets, my list of favorites, what have you. And then when the market opens, I religiously spend an hour just like looking at my stocks, looking at what I want to invest in, seeing what's up, what's down, what my friends are talking about in different Discord communities. And I try to stay like really plugged in and engaged on the market side of things, right? And then depending on like how successful I am through that kind of amount of stuff, did I find anything in the data, anything new in the news, anything new in my communities? I'll start either wrapping up my previous YouTube video or writing my next one. And I find that I never run out of ideas because that morning will always generate something. There hasn't been a day in my life where that doing those activities hasn't resulted in a new idea or a new essay or a new, like at least conversation that results in something down the road. Mm-hmm. So, and then it's off to the races on YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to us a little bit more about that Tableau software that you use to make those dashboards. Is that a paid software? I'm not familiar, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so Tableau is paid. I have a paid account. I think they have some limited access free versions of it, but Tableau is really for data visualization. So my background is in a lot of math and data analysis. So really quickly, I realized that Excel spreadsheets and that kind of stuff wouldn't be enough. I started with Google Spreadsheets. I maintain a free Google spreadsheet of all of ARK Invest data that auto updates, but really, there's lots of very interesting ways to pull apart that data and look at changes over short periods of time, medium and long periods of time, right? So what I did was I found Tableau as like the best visualization tool to do that. And what I do is I build a whole bunch of different ways to look at changes over time in the stocks that ARK Invest is buying and selling, and then tying that back to their research. Like, what are their convictions? I'll give you one clear, quick example. I built a dashboard that just looks at the amount of stocks that are in each fund over time, right? So it's like RK, their flagship fund, has anywhere from 30 to 60 stocks in it. And the reason I did that was because Cathie Wood in an interview said, hey, when we were at the market bottom, RK only had 35 or so positions in it. And those were our highest conviction stocks. We sold everything else, and all we did was concentrate down to buy Tesla at bargain basement prices, Square at bargain basement prices, CRISPR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this really interesting thing you can do with the data and say, hey, the lower the number of stocks in each of these funds, the more concentrated they must be into their highest conviction stocks, right? Like the closer to that 35 number, the more I can guarantee everything in that fund is very, very high conviction to Cathie Wood. So I started keeping track of that. And sure enough, over the last 2 weeks, there's this big downward spike in all of their funds. Hey, we must be near a market bottom because Cathie Wood is just dumping into Tesla, whatever she's buying, right? So that's a good tie-in of, hey, here's something this person said and is researching to it reflecting in the actual data, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's the absolutely. Motivation behind the dashboards.
Cool. Yeah, I love them. I think those are awesome. A subscriber of ours, Chris Woods, had a great question that I was interested in too. Tell us about your research process. Like, what are the main tools that you use, resources, maybe people? Just tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So the main tools that I use, I'm looking over at my browser window. So I'll just literally start rattling off tools. So my primary resource is always ARK Invest. So ARK Invest YouTube, when there's an update, ARK Invest websites, whatever, CNBC, if they're interviewing Cathie Wood, et cetera. So including things like analyst interviews. Then my other ones are Simply Wall Street, Seeking Alpha, and Yahoo Finance on the financial side. And then I'm a big believer in Global X, Rethink X, and some of the other disruptive innovation companies and funds that look like ARK Invest, but may not be, they're not managed by Kathy. They're completely separate companies, but they write a lot on disruptive innovation and companies you can invest in if you believe in this change or that trend or these set of rules or whatever. And then some of my other things are like medium.com, Inside Edge, and a lot more of these like, I subscribe to artificial intelligence blogs, like various like more math and sciencey stuff, because I think academia is sort of where a lot of these insights come from. So, MIT's Media Lab, MIT's AI Lab, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just like, oh, hey, this cool new development, I could see a company forming around that, or this is a cool new way to solve a problem. Like I subscribe to Netflix's research blog, for example. And that's just a way for me to, have both sides of the spectrum, right? The financials and the hard data around the stocks, but also the academics that are driving the deep innovations in the companies behind those stocks.
Nice. What about platforms when it comes to research, like Twitter, Reddit, YouTube? How would you rank those in terms of time spent where you get your research?
Yeah, a lot of my research comes from YouTube. Like one of the reasons I even started a YouTube channel is because that's how I digest media as well. Very visual, very audio learner. So for me, YouTube was like no brainer. That's where I should be looking. I look to other channels, including Electrified, to understand like, hey, what is going on in this space of the world, right? After that, it's Twitter, just because that's where everyone posts, right? Chamath, he writes a one pager on a new company. He's posting that to Twitter, right? Like, so that's where I'm at. I don't do Reddit. I read Reddit for entertainment, like passively, but none of my research takes place on Reddit. None of my research takes place on any other like text-based forums other than Twitter.
Awesome. Tell us about your Tesla story. When did you first hear about Tesla?
Yeah, so I was pretty late to the game on Tesla, believe it or not. I knew about them as a company for years and years and years, well before I made the connection that they're going to be a killer stock and they're going to change the world in a meaningful way, and that's going to be reflected in the market. My Tesla story is actually a pretty bad one, to be honest. So I first got exposed to Tesla as a stock in about 2017, I would say. It was in ARK's ARK W fund, their fund themed around the internet revolution and, new sort of, advanced internet technology stocks, which oddly enough, Tesla sits at the top of. So I invested in Tesla a little bit. And then in 2018, I ordered a Model 3. And I couldn't get it. So I was living overseas at the time. I needed a car by a certain day when I came back. And Tesla didn't hit my order. Like they were like, oh, there's an 8-month delay on your order. It was right in the middle of production hell, right? So I was like, oh, Tesla's a bad company, right? And I'm saying, like, I obviously don't believe that today, but it's like these guys can't even deliver me a car I'm ordering a year in advance, right? Like, what's going on? Sold all my Tesla stock at like a steep discount, right? Like, got out. It's like, this company is not for me, And then, I moved to the States. I buy my gas-powered vehicle that I'm not proud to own and whatever. And then, of course, right, what is the best performing company in the world? The company I dumped out of for like pennies on the dollar like 2 years earlier, ARK Invest's #1 stock pick. Like I couldn't be more wrong about my stance on Tesla. And that really woke me up to, hey, there's a big disconnect between how you interact with the company, Tesla blowing my order, and what Tesla represents on a global scale. That change to electrification, the acceleration to renewable energies, the big movement they're trying to create, and the stumbling blocks that they'll hit along the way, right? So that's my exposure to Tesla, to ARK, and to like the broader markets all in one roller coaster of a story.
Interesting. That's actually a pretty good one, I would say.
Yeah.
So how about Tesla stock? What is your relationship? Do you own any? Are you actively accumulating? Do you have like an exit strategy? And to everybody watching, this is not financial advice. Just what is your take on Tesla stock?
Yeah. So I exited Tesla literally at the top, which was really lucky for me. I hold one share. My cost basis is $420.69, and I will hold that share forever. I strongly believe in the long-term future of Tesla stock. I think now is a great time to buy, not financial advice. But I am accumulating other companies at the moment. I have actually even sold a lot of my ARK stock because I believe stocks within those funds, including Tesla, are very, very depressed right now. They're selling at a big discount. So just like ARK, I'm concentrating down into my highest conviction positions because, that's where I think the market is heading. And I don't think Tesla is one of them in the immediate term, purely because it's already had its run, right? It's had such a massive rally. I think it's got a little more growing into its valuation than it has to do.
Yeah, I agree. What about threats to Tesla? Like, what would you say is the biggest threat?
Oh gosh, so this is where I'm going to get all the flack again. I actually think the biggest threat to Tesla is Elon Musk, right? I think Elon is a genius. I think he's done an amazing thing, multiple amazing things. But I think a lot of the actions he's taking on Twitter with Dogecoin, with buying Bitcoin and then deciding not to transact in it, I think if Tesla is ever going to get damaged, it's going to be from the inside, not the outside. I strongly believe there's no direct competitor to Tesla. They're miles and miles ahead of their competition in many, many different regards. Certainly battery technology, certainly, miles driven for autonomous navigation and all that kind of stuff. Well, by extension, I don't think they're going to get displaced or damaged by an outside competitor. So where is that damage going to take place? It's going to be an Elon or some senior executive or someone inside doing something that hurts Tesla. And right now, the most public figure that could do the most damage to Tesla is Elon, right? So I think and it's hard to mitigate that risk, right? He's got that cult of personality. Everyone loves him, certainly including me. But, I think that's where Tesla can get in real trouble, is something Elon says gets misinterpreted or whatever. And that starts some big snowball that no one can get out from under,
Yeah, Elon is actually my biggest threat to Tesla, but it's for a different reason. It was if something were to happen to him, like if he were to die in a plane crash. I think Tesla is set up and they're in a place where they have the people and they're big enough now to execute on their plan. But I do think they would lose a lot of that fandom and the personality that he brings. That is he really is one of a kind. So they would, of course, lose that. Let's go back a little bit to some of your higher conviction stocks right now. What, if it's not Tesla, what are you more interested in, at least in the near term?
Sure. I think one of the big things that people are sleeping on is the reliability of the energy grid. So one of my biggest conviction stocks right now is a company called CleanSpark. Its ticker symbol is CLSK, CleanSpark. And CleanSpark, they do hardware, software, and energy consulting. But really what they focus on is creating smart microgrids. And what that really does is they can optimize. They basically are if Tesla Autobidder was its own company, that would be CleanSpark, right? And so what they try to do is they try to set up either clients on their own microgrids or towns on microgrids or whatever. And what that means is a microgrid is a electrical grid that includes production, utilization, and storage that's not tied to a centralized grid necessarily. And then what they do is they build software that helps route energy to different things based on a parameter. So for example, in a hospital, reliability is really important. You need 100% uptime because certain critical life-saving machines need electricity to run all the time. You can't unplug them, right? So being able to optimize for reliability makes sense for a hospital. Being able to optimize for costs might make sense for a community, right? Being able to optimize for, return on investment. For example, I want to maximize the amount of electricity I send back to the grid in exchange for dollars is another one. And so what CleanSpark is able to do is dynamically route energy to consumers or storage to meet different criterias that different clients could have. And I think that's a very attractive business proposition with software like margins. And so I'm a big investor in CleanSpark. I have many thousands of shares of that.
Yeah, it sounds good. So, okay, the year is 2026. What company has the second best-selling EV, aka not Tesla, who has the best-selling EV in 2026? And is it a legacy automaker or an EV startup?
I think it's going to be NIO. I don't know why people are sleeping. ARK Invest is sleeping on NIO. I don't really know what's going on. I think the best-selling EV is going to be an EV that's almost as good as Tesla with a home field advantage, right? Tesla's going to blow the doors off in America. It already has in many ways. I think NIO has a huge home field advantage. I think they're a wonderful company. I think they have this really interesting alternative battery architecture with battery swapping as an option, which makes a lot of sense to me in constrained urban environments where not everyone has access to a charger. And they're a good company. You know, they focus on lifestyle. They have all these other, the NIO Home and the NIO Lifestyle, like rooms and like all these added perks that, you know, just like Tesla is thinking about all these other things. I think NIO is going to really, maybe dominate's too strong of a word, but they're going to really succeed in China. And I think, you know, that's going to be, when you look at the global statistics, it's going to be Tesla's dominance in the countries it dominates, and then NIO's dominance specifically in Asia.
Same question, but in America. What do you say?
You know, it could be a legacy automaker. So the Ford Lightning, right? Like the F-150, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the best-selling cars of all time, best-selling vehicles of all time, I should say. So if Ford really takes they pound their fist and they say, we're going electric and we're going to take all our popular models and we're going to make them electric, I think they'd be very successful. I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we think Ford is going under, if they're trying to make a big play for electrification. If they're too slow and if they let themselves get displaced, that's a different story. But if like the F-150, the Mustang, some of their other very, very brand recognized vehicles are truly on the path to mass electrification, I think they're going to be a front runner up there with Tesla in the long term. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. Actually, I think it's going to be a legacy automaker just because of their scale already, you know, and they definitely have massive obstacles to overcome transitioning from the ICE system. But when I think about pure play EVs or just EV startups like Rivian, Lucid, they have such a long way to go to develop a brand of reliability. Yeah, I just think the legacy automakers, if they commit to electrification, which most signs would be that that's exactly what they're doing, they have every opportunity to be that kind of tier B player right behind Tesla in the EV space. So yeah, I agree. What are you most excited about for Tesla? Is it 4680s? Is it the Model 2, the Cybertruck, something else? What gets you going?
I think it's the Robotaxi. Yeah, so like the Model 2, I think is going to be killer. I think I really like the Cybertruck, but I think it's going to be mobility as a service, man. I'm really pumped for them to fully solve autonomous navigation. I think that's going to blow the doors off a lot of different opportunities we're not seeing. I think using the battery as a platform and by extension a vehicle as a platform for all these different things that we can do once you are able to fully take your hands off the wheel and your eyes off the road. I think there's so much market opportunity for that captive audience. I'm in the back seat. I'm stuck there for 30 minutes. What am I going to do? How is Tesla filling that time and extracting value? I think I'm really pumped for that. Obviously, the 4680s are going to be critical for is that going in every car? Is that new battery form factor going in every car eventually? Like, if so, I think that's...
Yeah, I would say eventually down the line, yes, but I think it's definitely not going to be right away. It's going to take a lot of time to scale, and some of the shorter range cars or the standard range, they're not going to need 4680s. So they're going to probably keep those for the Roadster and the Cybertruck and the long range vehicles. But in time, 20, 30 years, probably that's where they're trending,
Yeah, so that I think that's the heart of why I'm not excited for that one. When I watched their battery day, it sounded amazing. And I was like, oh, I can't wait for this new battery chemistry and form factor to hit cars. But it's like, that's not sweeter to me than the car driving you instead of you driving the car. I think that's the real thing that excites me the most, Project Dojo and that kind of stuff.
For sure. So we got to talk about this. So timeline for a Robotaxi. When are we going to see a true Robotaxi, driverless, operating in a business function? What is the year?
I'm going to say 2026. And that's definitely pulled out of thin air. But I think we're going to be able to solve that a lot sooner. And then it's going to come down to government regulation, right? Like a lot of things that stand in the way of Tesla are things that are out of Tesla's control. It's going to be, does Congress come together and say, hey, who is liable for this accident? How does insurance work? How do you calculate risk of a robot versus a human? Who's at fault in a 2-car collision with only one driver, right? Like there's all these policy challenges that are going to have to get mitigated to understand, like, what does loss of life mean when the computer made a choice that results in some other human losing their life. I think that's a hotly fierce debate. That debate has a lot of merit on both sides, and it's got to get solved before people are letting cars drive around with humans in the back, no one controlling it in the front. I think it's that. I think the computing will be there way before policy agrees on what the right answer is.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Do you have any input or takes on the actual logistics of it?
Naively, that's what I think too. I think if you're saying, hey, my car drives itself, what you're saying is, by definition, hey, I'm responsible for anything that happens when my car drives itself. And then the question is, who pays for that? Is Tesla insuring every car? Is Tesla forcing every autonomous taxi owner to pay for that insurance? Like, what does the insurance model look like when a Tesla product makes a decision that's out of the owner's control, right? Like, your guess is as good as mine on what logistically that means for Tesla insurance versus third-party insurers who now don't own Teslas, right? Like, yeah, it's a different market, I think, when you're not in control of the decisions, right? So
for sure. What about timeline for when it will have a driver, like basically level 5, but there's going to be a driver behind the seat? Do you think that'll be years sooner? I don't know. Nobody knows, but what's your guess?
Yeah. So if Elon is to believe that he's already driving mostly intervention free, right, in his beta test of full self-driving, it's almost June of 2021. Let's say I bet in the next 1 year, we could see that update rolled out everywhere with the same claims in more edge cases, right? So what that means is by June of 2022, I bet cars are mostly truly driverless. The amount of interventions per drive is very close to zero, right? It's like one intervention a week, not even one intervention per commute. It's like, some random pedestrian wearing some really shiny thing messed up the camera, and that's what caused the intervention. Some very rare edge case, right?
Makes sense. Do you have plans to own a Tesla anytime soon?
I would love to. Yeah, my next car is definitely going to be a Tesla. I would love to own a Model X or a Cybertruck. I like their bigger vehicles for sure. I would have owned a Model 3 years ago. Just didn't work out for me. So my next car, definitely a Tesla. Learned my lesson last time.
So do you have a timeline, or are you waiting for something specific in terms of technology?
I think I am waiting for, the new battery chemistry to come in, the new updates for, if not full self-driving, then at least autopilot, right? I know they're in the process of doing an interior refresh. Is that right? So I'm going to let that roll out. Yeah. So it's like, for sure, once more of those things that are on the immediate horizon are already well into production and all the kinks have been worked out, I don't want the first car off that new lot, right? I want to let all the iterations, I think then. So I'm probably about 3 years out, but not 5 years out from that new Tesla for sure.
Yeah. And I get that question a lot. How can I be a Tesla YouTuber and not own a Tesla? Well, my wife and I both work from home and we don't drive anywhere.
Yeah.
And our car is paid off. So
for sure,
the car I would really like, a performance Model 3, spending $70,000. It's a huge trade-off to not put that money into the crypto space for me. But I think eventually we do really want to get a Cybertruck. It'd be great for the channel. But I would want to wait for the 4680s. And if we were to go Model Y, I think the structural battery pack is something that I would definitely want to wait for. There's always the next thing. So even then, it's like you're going to have that same dilemma with Tesla, but mostly it's a good problem to have. Talk to us about ARK Invest portfolio limits, and we'll relate it to Tesla. So there's been so much debate. Is it a 10% limit? Is it 30%? What is your understanding of their portfolio allocation limits?
Yeah, so I have seen that conversation about 30% limits. I don't know what the governing bodies limit them to or whatever. I know ARK Invest has a self-imposed, and whether that's because of the ETF as a financial product and mechanism, or because it's Cathie Wood from the top down has imposed this limit. I can't speculate. But that 10% limit is a soft limit, right? Meaning we've seen Tesla go as high as 12% of a fund, so 20% higher than that 10% limit, which doesn't sound like much on paper, but incredibly, incredibly over that limit, right? Difference between 12% and 10% is pretty big, especially in such a quantitative field like finance, where you can control that with robots and automated software and all that. So I know it's a soft limit simply because the data show that they'll surpass it if they really think so. The 30% limit, I think what that actually could be, if I'm not mistaken, is the amount of a company they're willing to own. So for example, some of these micro cap companies where when they buy tons and tons of stock, they're now starting to own a legit percentage of that company. I think there's a limit that they impose. Hey, we're not going to buy any more of this company because A, there becomes a liquidity issue. When we want to sell, we have no one to sell to. We own a lot of these shares. But B, now our buy and sell behavior around this company is largely controlling the price. We're a self-fulfilling prophecy. When we decide to buy more, demand, is going up. Where the demander, supply is finite, that spikes the price. So I think they have some and again, I don't want to speculate whether it's self-imposed or some regulation that they follow or whatever. But there's also this limit on how much of a company they'll own. Not a problem for mega cap companies like Tesla, where I believe they own like half of 1% of all of Tesla. And by own, I mean that's represented in their funds, right? Versus something like a CRISPR or another, genomics, very, very small company relative to Tesla, where they can own 5, 10, 15, 20% of the company, at least the company's public float, right?
Sure. So when ARK trades Tesla, what advice would you have for people that own Tesla that get spooked when they see ARK sells X amount of Tesla? And on the converse, when they buy, does that change your stance on the company? Like, how would you encourage people to think through ARK's moves with Tesla?
Yeah. So there's two things you got to remember about ARK that's not true for you and certainly not true for me. ARK manages a financial product. They are thinking about Tesla as a part of a total portfolio that fits into a specific strategy, specific theme. They're managing that thing in terms of qualitative things, right? Like the theme that it represents, autonomy, navigation, internet, right? And quantitatively, like the amount of risk it has, the amount it correlates to an index, like all these other weird things we don't care about, right? As retail investors. When they sell Tesla, it's because probably because it ran like crazy and it just represents too much of their portfolio, but B, because they can find better gains somewhere else in that fund specifically, right? Among their other stocks, something got depressed. Among their other stocks, some news has changed. Some earnings report revealed something new that they like, whatever. So they will buy low and sell high on Tesla, redeploy that capital, knowing that they're definitely going to be buying low on Tesla down the road. Because if it's one thing that's true about Tesla stock, it's incredibly volatile, right? Mm-hmm. So the last thing I'll say about Tesla is it's been their number one held stock, whether you combine their funds or not. It's always number one in any fund that it's in forever and ever and ever. So until literally another stock becomes their biggest holding, either in one fund or in all funds combined, you should never worry about ARK's conviction in Tesla. It's literally like one of every $11 or $12 they have is in Tesla. So it's some crazy amount of money,
What do you see as the biggest obstacle to mainstream EV adoption?
Mainstream EV adoption, yeah, I think it's consumer range anxiety. I think people don't realize how far batteries have come, what the infrastructure is actually like, what's going on. I have people all the time, I'd get a Tesla, but if I want to go on a road trip, which no one ever ends up going on, by the way, then where am I going to supercharge? I'm going to have to wait an hour. I have to plan my route according to the supercharger network and all that stuff, right? And in some places, in some parts of the country, that is still true. And I can see that when you're comparing your 550 mile per tank of gas car to, let's say, a 350 mile Tesla, for sure, that makes sense. But I think the thing that people are missing that would increase mainstream adoption is being honest about how many road trips you take, doing a little bit of research on the actual infrastructure, right? And then understanding, for example, the tax benefits and rebates that are available in your state about getting a Tesla. And then maybe the economics and the logistics make a little more sense than you think. Maybe they don't. But if they do, I think you'll find that more and more people would be willing to buy an EV, Tesla or otherwise. We tend to talk about Tesla and EVs synonymously.
When it comes to Tesla and Bitcoin mining, I know you've kind of gone down this rabbit hole a little bit. So tell us about it. What's the potential that you see and why are you bullish about this?
Yeah, so I think the idea here is Bitcoin mining is a very energy consuming activity, right? And there's certain special properties about Bitcoin and crypto on the energy side that makes it really attractive to energy providers and energy for lack of a better word, directors like Tesla, right? Like Tesla's auto bidder. So in a nutshell, what's going on is the more energy you throw at Bitcoin, the more your returns, right? But what that actually means is you can say, I want to throw more or less energy at this problem, energy being electricity, computing power, whatever resources you want to talk about. And I will dynamically adjust the amount of Bitcoin I'm mining accordingly. What does that mean to Tesla? Tesla has this ability to direct energy and manage costs, right? Hey, it makes more sense to store it now. Hey, it makes more sense to ship it over there now. Shipping energy incurs a cost, by the way. Hey, it makes more sense to use it now, right? Store, ship, or use, right? Well, there's this fourth option, which is direct it to this consumer, these Bitcoin miners that can dynamically adjust their load. You always have somebody who's willing to use it when they can get it and who can scale down operations as they can no longer get it. Very much unlike a hospital that needs that 100% reliability, right? You can think of a Bitcoin miner as the exact opposite use case for a hospital in terms of energy. Well, that should be really attractive to guys like Elon who build energy management systems, energy production, energy storage, and energy direction, because they have this whole separate market that will always buy energy when it's available, making it always more cost effective than maybe storing it, which is really expensive, right? So now there's this other side of the coin that Elon cares about, which he's tweeted at very publicly, very recently, which is the carbon footprint of Bitcoin mining, right? So why not marry those two ideas? Why not build a fully integrated crypto mining solution, like he's built a fully integrated point-to-point transportation solution that cleans up the energy usage of crypto mining, right? It guarantees it comes from some renewable energy source. It rewards crypto miners who expend energy via renewable sources, right? And control that problem from the energy side. Tesla is fundamentally an energy company instead of worrying about the crypto side, right? Because Tesla is a holder of crypto, but certainly not a maker of crypto, right? Like they own Bitcoin. They will transact in Bitcoin again someday. It's on their balance sheet, but they're not, besides Elon's limited interactions with the Dogecoin developers, which I think is very real, but maybe insignificant compared to how much effort he's had on Tesla. I think he has a lot of work he can add value with on the energy side, not the cryptography side, if that makes sense.
But speaking of crypto, what are you most excited about in that space? And take this like wherever you want. Just kind of what are you researching and how do you see this playing out the next 10 years?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's so much to be excited about in the crypto space. Just like you, I have a public equities channel that does not care about crypto at all. So that's kind of unfortunate. But my time spent researching crypto is actually on two fronts. The first is just looking at different exchanges and understanding, the difference between a centralized exchange, thinking about Binance and Coinbase versus sort of things more like Trust Wallet, which are like, for lack of a better word, a decentralized apps and dApps where you can more swap between tokens, but you had to get your initial capital there somehow through some other means, right? So understanding the coins that are driving those exchanges, for example, Binance Smart Chain, Freeway token for AUBit, what's another example? Matic for Polygon, et cetera. So that's one set of coins. And then the other is like gamified tokens and NFTs, right? So tokens that have to do with different lottery games that are crypto based, different, trading card games that are NFT backed and all this kind of like funky stuff. I think exchanges are going to be the way that investors get into crypto, and games are the way that the average person is going to get into crypto. There's going to be a Facebook game one day and you don't realize you're earning points in crypto by playing. And it's like this really fun, interesting system and you can walk away with money. I think that's how we get the average person into crypto. It's like, hey, there's this really fun activity. It happens to be a crypto backed or based activity. And you're willing to try it just because it's the Pokemon Go of crypto, right? Sure. So those two things are like where I spend my time. How the entry points for crypto is where I really care about.
Why do you think so many people in the Tesla space or traditional finance are like anti-Bitcoin or disinterested? Because anytime I've ever tried to talk about it on Tesla, people just aren't that interested. Why do you think that is?
I think the answer was hidden in the question. I think the type of investor we're both reaching is a very traditional investor. They like things that they can touch, see, and understand. I liken crypto and genomics in the same space. The reason people aren't interested is because conceptually there's this, I can't reach out and touch it. Right? So people tend to like Teslas because they get batteries, they get cars, they get steering wheels. They can even make the far reach and say, yeah, I can imagine a world where I'm no longer driving the car because I understand and I know from driving, it's a brainless activity, right? I listen to music, I can eat while driving, people do their makeup, they do all sorts of funny stuff when they're driving because driving most of the time isn't an intellectual task. When you talk about crypto, nobody can easily grasp what you're talking about, myself included. It took me a long time to really get my brain behind this decentralized, trustless verification system, blockchain, ledgers. It still hurts my head to even put those words together. And I'm deep into this. So I think that's why crypto channels and crypto advisors and all these different things are in their own niche category because it takes a different mindset, a different initial set of, going into it with different expectations than you would find in a stock tied to a company you can point to on a map and say, this is where that company is. Here's what that company does. It makes this iPhone, right? Et cetera. You know what I mean? One is completely electrons and you'll never see its product. And the other is, hey, I can go out and point to that whenever I want, right?
For sure. Yeah. And like I said, I could talk about this for a long time, but the one thing I want to say to people is that are skeptical or anti-Bitcoin, whatever, separate the currency, the Bitcoin, from the underlying blockchain technology and keep an open mind to learning the blockchain space, cryptography, and why this decentralization and the trustless networks, how this really is going to revolutionize the world. And the other thing is, in America, we don't have many issues, or we haven't so far, but in other places of the world where these countries have hyperinflation and people don't have access to banking, at a very simple level, blockchain gives anybody with the internet access to the global financial system in this crypto space. There are literally billions with a B people on the planet that do not have access to a bank. They live in a cash society. So this will allow the farmer in wherever to have access to the global financial system in a way that they never have before. And like I said, this is years down the road, but this is where things are going. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it's the most interesting thing going on in the world of finance, and it's a global revolution. And like I said, it's here whether you like it or not. So I would just encourage people, because from an investment standpoint, I've never seen anything like it. The asymmetry, meaning the upside versus the downside.
Yeah, the risk reward.
It's insane. Yeah.
And you mentioned the farmer. So what I'll do real quick is I'll mention the opposite side of the spectrum, the fund manager. One thing you should also be aware of is, I'm an ARK Invest channel. ARK Invest invests in disruptive companies. More and more of those companies are getting exposure to Bitcoin. So even if you don't care about Bitcoin directly, 8% of Tesla's cash is in Bitcoin. 1% of all of Square's assets is in Bitcoin. Coinbase makes most of its money in Bitcoin. The three stocks I just mentioned are all ARK Invest top 10 positions. ARK Invest stocks are very sensitive to the price of Bitcoin. So it behooves you to understand that technology at least at a surface level, because when you buy ARK's products, they are sensitive to Bitcoin, period.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, completely agree. So kind of speaking of these returns, if you had $10,000 to invest for the next 10 years, just looking to get the highest ROI outside of a casino, where would you put it? Not financial advice.
I would put it. That's a good question. Returns 10 years. Mm-hmm. I would find. I would go find one of, if it's not crypto, right? So me personally, I would go find the exchange that I think is the best crypto exchange, up and coming, disproportionately priced today, right? If I had to invest it all today, and just blow all my money on that coin, right? So for me, that might look like Freeway Token or Polygon or whatever, right? It's one of these exchanges that today isn't dominating, but in 10 years is going to have a very high market cap relative to today, right? if it's not a company like that, it would be a company that does something that Tesla does much better than Tesla. And by that, I mean, like, it does energy management much better than Tesla, but doesn't build cars, or it builds battery systems that are much smarter than Tesla's, but doesn't build cars or solar panels or anything. So something much more niche than Tesla, but much better at that niche than Tesla. So for me, if that I had to put a stock to it, the stock that I always go to in cases like that is a company like CleanSpark, which does what AutoBidder does at a very high level, much better than Tesla, but doesn't do anything else that Tesla does. So that's not a dig on Tesla at all. Tesla has already had its run, and CleanSpark, in my opinion, has not. So that's where I would put it.
Cool. Talk a little bit more about that. What exactly are they doing better than Tesla?
Yeah, so I think they've just invested a lot more in the software, hardware, and firmware that goes into energy management specifically. So one of the things that CleanSpark does on the hardware side is make it so that no matter what vendor your solar panels are, for example, or your energy generations are, they can talk to CleanSpark's energy management system, right? So vendor agnostic. You don't need to buy all of CleanSpark solutions to make some of CleanSpark solutions work. On the software side, they hold a lot of powerful patents in terms of the way they route and calculate energy, usage. So like, hey, if you want 100% uptime and reliability because you're a hospital, here's the math we're doing to get that energy there without wasting it, right? So they have a lot of good software. And then obviously the stuff that sits in the middle of those two things, having a universal, the USB port of electricity, for lack of a better explanation, to connect whatever you want to that software. So that firmware layer is a really slick proposition to me. And so you marry the fact that they can do these things with the fact that they have software-like margins. I think that's increasingly going to be important. The grid is going to be increasingly smart, and I think CleanSpark is one of the companies that is really going to capitalize on that.
Cool. Good to know. Outside of electrification, what technology are you most excited about?
I think edge computing, would be my answer to that. So edge computing, in a nutshell, is like right now, everything is done on the cloud. A lot of things are done on the cloud, I should say. So when I have an advanced computation that needs to get done, I actually need internet access to do that, because it needs to talk to some server, run some math, and then come back and give me the solution. Increasingly, chips are getting better and better. So your phone is more capable of doing things. Your car is more capable of doing things, et cetera, without needing that internet access, because it's self-contained. The sensors do the sensing. They route stuff to an onboard computer that crunches the numbers, never leaves the vehicle, and then the vehicle drives itself, or the phone does whatever, right? Takes some measurement or whatever. That unlocks a lot of applications that right now don't exist, because you can't guarantee 100% reliability on your cell phone coverage, right? You can't guarantee 100% that your car is going to be cell phone covered or Wi-Fi covered or whatever. And when that changes, we're going to see a lot more autonomous navigation, not just for robotaxis, but think about drones and all the different drone applications that enables, right? I think that's going to be super duper sweet. And that relies on edge computing.
What is the best book you've ever read?
The best book I've actually ever read is probably Thinking Fast and Slow. I think it's by a Nobel winner. His name is Daniel Kahneman. He's a psychologist who won the Nobel Prize in economics. I hope I said his last name right. And that book is all about our biases as human beings, like how we think about the world, how we process information, and what that means for the markets. It sounds like a really dense and boring book, but he's an incredible writer, and he's really funny, and he's like really clever about like the examples that he uses. So Thinking Fast and Slow, and then Blink by Malcolm Gladwell is another great book along the same lines, processing information quickly or slowly, and what that means for humanity.